Hello and welcome back to the channel. And now in this episode we're going to look at painting the armour on our bust, working on a non-metallic metal, in particular a more sort of realistic polished sort of steel effect. The way I'm doing this armour has been inspired by an artist called Kirill Kaneev, who's one of my favourite miniature painters, who does a lot of realistic sort of busts and 28mm figures as well. He's really good. Check him out if you've got time. He's got a lovely book out called FAQ. I highly recommend buying it. So like we did with the flesh, we're going to light the figure from the top right, so that way the light balance is in harmony with all the work that we've done so far. As you can see here, I've got the light on the miniature, so we can see all the highlighted points that's been picked up by our light source. We'll then use this image as the foundation for our first step, which will be sketching out the highlights. So our first step is to block in the highlights using just pure white. We're going to go at it just nice, rough and ready, just generally highlighting the areas and following the sort of shapes that were picked up on our light sketch that we saw earlier. I'm going to put that up in the top corner so we've got reference for it as we go through the stages of painting. Although we've got our sketch in the corner there to give us a little idea, it's not the be-all and end-all. I will be putting in additional sort of reflective points or bounces of lights as well, but these will just block out the main general primary lights that we're going to get from our light source. So here's how it's looking after the first highlights. Again, it's just a general sketch of the lights, putting in where, based off our source, with a couple of extra bounce points as well. So our next stage is to now block in the rest of the armour. With this we're going to use sky grey, or you could use any form of sort of light grey as well. Don't worry too much about shadow areas because we're going to be using deeper greys and blacks and other colours in order to block these out later on. But just for now, just fill in the rest of the armour. So here we have the rest of the armour blocked in. What I've also done is I've gone back over the white again because it wasn't really making itself clear with the grey. So that way then we've got two different tones of colour on the armour. Our next step is to darken the armour a bit now. So we're going to use London Grey for this. But again, any sort of darkish sort of grey, you want a mid to dark sort of tone, nothing too dark at this stage because the contrast will be a bit too stark, but you don't want it too light because our next step would again be too much of a step of a contrast. Here you see I'm doing a sort of kind of like a jagged line effect on the dark grey. This is just a setup for our environmental reflections that we're going to do later on, just to act as the sort of backdrop for this. So with this step completed and 3 tones of colour on the model, you can see we're starting to get that appearance of a reflection to set us up for the metallic look that we're aiming to get. So now we're looking at deepening the contrast a bit more using black. From here, we're going to use it where it's a little bit more diluted than a layer paint. So I don't want to have too stark of a color on there at this point, because we can then deepen it down later on if we need to. So a little bit heavier than the glaze. This is the consistency that you're looking for. With this, you want to work inside the previous color, just like we've been doing with all the other layers up until this point. For this next step, we're just going to break up the larger white highlights that we've done earlier. This is just so that it might simulate the reflection of clouds, show deformities in the armor, etc. So it's not just a large area of just pure white. For this, you're going to use a 50-50 mix of white and your light grey that you used. So again, this will give another little tone to the armour as well. With this new colour, you're just going to put in just some random little shapes within the white. You can do it so it comes from the grey into the white. You can do it within the white itself. It's entirely up to you. So now we're going to put a little bit more colour interest into the armour. For this, because we're working with a polished steel, it's a very reflective surface, it's going to take some of the environment and reflect it back. So we're going to start off by reflecting the sky in some parts of the armour. Look for parts whereby it's hit by the main light, and it's got an upward facing, so it will just be reflecting of the sky and nothing else. So for this, I'm going to use Prussian blue to represent the sky. Looking back, I think this colour might have been a little bit too dark, so I recommend if you're trying this at home, just use a lighter blue to represent the sky. Don't go overboard with it as well. There could be a tendency to perhaps put a lot of blue on here, in which case you're going to end up more of a blue armor than a steel armor. Just little bits here and there. Again, it's just more of an impressionistic representation of the sky. You don't have to go too heavy with it. Our next step is to now represent the other elements of the environment. So we're looking at things like the ground, if there's a tree line, etc., anything like that. You can picture a scene and use whatever colours you want. I'm just doing a very simple sort of kind of like green forestry sort of surrounding. So we're just going to block it out by first using a light brown. I believe for this I used brown violet. I can't remember the colour exactly. So where to place this would be anywhere on the armour where it has a downward facing, so it'll be reflecting the ground, or as it comes up to more of a level facing, so it will be reflective of the horizon. Again, you got to think very impressionistic here. You're not doing a full-on landscape on the armor. You're merely giving the impression that there are other things surrounding the figure by putting just influences of color where they would reflect. So here's the armor so far. As you can see with the brown, the more that the armor is facing the ground directly, the stronger the color is going to be. I then start to plot in some of sort of like the ground foliage or surrounding tree line, but I'm using here a bit too much of a yellowish green, and I end up not being happy with it. And in the next step, we actually go over this with a more desaturated green. So now the armor's really taking a nice little shine to it now. We're getting these environmental reflections in there. And it's starting to look quite nice, but we've still got lots of steps to go yet. This is where we now take the steps to blend the armor in and to also provide texture at the same time. So for this, we're going to start with white, and you're going to go to the borders of all the white areas that we've put in and start doing little scratches into the other colours surrounding it. Following, if you imagine if the armour was being polished, it would be polished in one singular direction. So we're going to be looking at trying to mimic that with how we put our scratches on. Once you've done this with the white, you'll then move on to the light grey, doing that into the darker grey and so forth until all the different colours have been blended in. So now you can see with all the scratches on, you get that nice sort of distorted effect, especially when we look at how the environmental reflections have applied to the armour as well. As you can see from here, I've mostly focused on, just for the purposes of the video, the breastplate and Uther's left arm. So you can see where that's had the most attention, and you can also look at it so you can see the difference. If you look at his right glove holding the sword hilt compared to how it is, it's almost like a before and after. So here I'm just putting in a couple of little light glazes just to some of the greens and some of the other colours, just to smooth out some areas and also to redefine colours in particular areas as well. Just see how it looks to you, how, you know, if there's any areas on your project that you feel needs attention, just slap it on with a glaze just to try and bring it all back together. From here, I've lightened up our green a little bit, using a bit of a yellowish colour, and I'm just using it as a glaze just to bring back some foreground details into our reflection and just to redefine the ground a little bit. Same glazing process again with the blue now, just to smooth it out and maybe redefine some of our sky reflections. And finally with the black, again just to bring back some of the contrast and darken some of the shadow areas a bit. Now with our black in a slightly thicker consistency than a glaze, we're going to look at now black lining some of the armor panels, and then we'll start working on patinaing, scratching, and just adding general weather and deformities to the armor. So here, using the black, just doing some light stippling around some of the edging of the plates, just to represent battle damage, general wear and tear, and so forth. So now taking the white, we're going to look to doing some general abnormalities on the plating, some polish marks, scratch marks, and so forth. With this, we're going to use the white, going from already blocked in white highlights, and we're just going to do strokes randomly in different directions, just to show how the light is bouncing differently off micro areas on the actual armor plate. And that's it. So as you can see, we've got a nice polished, shiny armor effect for Ufa. I've done a little bit extra little details. I started to block in the book that he's carrying and done the necessary reflections in the armor there. I'll obviously carry on with that later on at a later date. I hope you've liked and enjoyed. If so, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down in the box below, and happy painting.